There's several. There at Pittsburgh field office is the lead office. We obviously have lots of, I think it's about half, maybe over half of the FBI's field offices are working on this, including almost every headquarters division. So we have lots and lots and lots, several hundreds of employees working on it.
All right,
but yes.
Pittsburgh's the lead. Okay. This is the same office that botched the Hunter Biden laptop case. And they, in my view, and my constituents and many Americans, displayed a clear reluctance, that's a quote, reluctance to really do any tasking, quote, effectively failing to investigate, according to the U.S. attorney on the case. My question is, how can we trust this office, and why does it keep reappearing in critical election-related investigations, or is that just dumb luck?
So I want to be a little bit careful on what I can say here, because some of what you're talking about relates to an ongoing investigation being led by the special counsel, Mr. Weiss. But what I can tell you is that the Pittsburgh field office's involvement in the matter you're talking about was the choice by the Attorney General Barr to have the U.S. Attorney and the FBI field office in Pittsburgh handle that particular matter. As to your summary or characterization of what U.S. Attorney, now former U.S. Attorney Brady actually said, I'd have to see the whole context. I'm not quite sure that's what he said, but I think as to your overall question about confidence, what I would tell you is that's the point I'm trying to make about the sheer breadth of our investigation. Yes, the Pittsburgh field office is the office on the ground. That's where the attempted assassination happened. But we are using the full might of the FBI, criminal and national security. That's why I'm pointing out that multiple field offices, over half of our field offices, almost every headquarters division, several hundreds of employees. These are people who are working around the clock to deal with this historic attack. And I have the utmost confidence in those hundreds of employees, agents, analysts, and professional staff, and the American people should too.
I yield to Mr. Jordan.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. Director, I guess I'm not clear exactly where you said there were 8 shell casings on the roof, so 8 bullets were fired. We obviously know that Mr. Comparatori lost his life. Two other rally-goers were injured, seriously injured, and then the one that hit President Trump. Does that account for, were some of these individuals hit multiple times? Where did all 8 bullets go, is I guess my question.
I don't have that in front of me. I'm happy to circle back and get that to you. It's assuming we have that information yet. As I said, I think with respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear. So it's conceivable. Although, as I sit here right now, I don't know whether that bullet, in addition to causing the grazing, could have also landed somewhere else. But I believe we've accounted for all of the shots in the cartridges, so let us get that.
It's my understanding that the very first one was the one that hit the president. Is that the very first shot, or is that not accurate?
I don't, as I sit here right now, I don't know the answer to that. I believe we know the answer to that. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Is there any chance I mean, it seems to me that this bad guy, this shooter, was focused on President Trump. But you indicated that he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition, I believe, earlier that day. Do you have any indication thus far in your investigation that in addition to going after and trying to assassinate the former president, he was also looking to do a lot more damage to other individuals?
That's a hard question to answer. What I would say is I agree with you that his preparatory activity is what we've seen so far. The limited information that has been relevant and interesting about his preparatory activity does seem to be that he had settled on former President Trump as a target and this rally as his moment to try to take a shot. But in addition to the 50 rounds, of course, you have the issue of these explosive devices.
Right.
And so what else he may have had in mind is something that I think is very much of an open question. On the one hand, you have these explosive devices, including the one still back in his home that wasn't in quite the same stage as the one in the ones in the vehicle. But he clearly had those explosive devices for some reason. And so we're trying to figure that out. as I've said before, sometimes in these kind of situations you find like a manifesto or something like that. It's frustrating to us, and I'm sure frustrating to you and the American people, that we haven't found anything quite like that. We'd love to have a roadmap that tells us exactly what he was thinking. We haven't found that yet. Doesn't mean we won't. We're looking all over the place, and we're going to leave no stone unturned.
Thank you. A gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here today. I know it's been a very long day, busy day on Capitol Hill, and also I want to apologize in advance if there's any repetitive questions from me. But I have to ask, given that our sitting president resigned from the campaign on Sunday and the Secret Service Director resigned yesterday, you don't plan on resigning anytime soon, do you, sir?
No, sir.
Good to go. Earlier today, you told this committee that you recovered 8 bullet cartridges from the roof next to the shooter. And given that testimony, I have 2 questions for you. How many shots were fired at President Trump, and how many shots were fired in total of the entire day? I know I keep hearing 8, but were there any more that were unaccounted for?
The best information I have right now is 8 shots. As to the sequence, I'm not sure I have that sitting here right now. As I said to the chairman, I'm going to go back to my team and see if we've got that nailed down yet. And if we have, I'm happy to share it with you and the rest of the committee.
Please do, sir. Thank you very much for that. You also mentioned that the shooter used encrypted messages to communicate. Specifically, do you know what apps or what apps he was using to communicate, and can you confirm if he was communicating with any foreign nationals through the encrypted messages?
So as to the names of the apps, I don't have that right here in front of me. As far as communicating with any foreign actors, I'll say 2 things. One, we haven't, as I think I've testified before, but we have not, at the moment at least, identified any accomplices or co-conspirators, foreign or domestic. Sure. So that, as to foreign contacts, of course, that's part of why we want to get access to the encrypted messages, because that might tell us whether he'd been in contact with somebody.
Thank you. Let's talk about motive. I know the FBI has taken a lead role in investigating the assassination on President Trump. Your team has searched the shooter's phone, conducted countless interviews, done extensive research into his motives. As of today, July 24th, 2024, do you and your team know the motive of the shooter or have any idea on what could have driven it?
Well, know and have any idea are two very different things.
Okay.
We do not know the motive. That is obviously one of the central questions in our investigation. And it's been very frustrating to us that a lot of the usual kind of low-hanging fruit places that we would find at have not yielded significant clues about his motive. Okay. Having said that, we have seen indications that he was interested in public figures. And that in the period around July 6th, leading up to July 13th, he does seem to have become very focused on this particular rally and former President Trump. But exactly what his thought process was in doing that, that's something that's still very much under investigation.
I want to make something clear to the American people to try to help out what motive could be. And again, it's not my job to steer it, but here are some of my thoughts. I'm not sure about motive either, specifically, but I can tell you that after this assassination attempt, people on both sides have said that both parties need to tone down the rhetoric. But recently, just on Monday, in fact, President Biden called into the Harris campaign event and said that President Trump was a threat to democracy. Just take a look behind me at these photos. This is a magazine cover of the New Republic from June 2024, published just 1 month before the assassination attempt on President Trump. In a tweet explaining the cover, the New Republic said this: "Today, we at the New Republic think we can spend this election year in one of 2 ways. We could spend it debating whether Trump meets the 9 or 17 points that define fascism, or we could spend it saying he's damn close enough and we'd better fight. We unreservedly choose the latter course." Now, sir, I know you said that the FBI doesn't have a clear motive yet, and you've explained that, but in your professional experience as an investigator, do you think that language like this could radicalize someone to engage in political violence?
I certainly understand the point of the question. What I would tell you is that, respectfully, I don't think it's appropriate for me as FBI director to be characterizing or engaging in public commentary on specific people's rhetoric. And that's because it's not that I don't understand why you're raising the question, but I'm saying that in my role, I have to be very careful to make sure we speak through our work, and we speak through our cases and our intelligence products, not the FBI director chiming in the public square on different people's political commentary.
I understand. For the record, there was an assassination attempt on an American president, and I will be asking these same questions even if it were President Biden. And my message to the American people is that we need to do better. I give back the rest of my time, and thank you for being here, sir. I know it's been a very long day.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here. It's refreshing. I was in the oversight hearing earlier this week, and although we don't have an idea on everything, your ability to come in here and actually give way more than Director Cheadle ever did is somewhat refreshing. You saw some pretty bipartisan frustrations exhibited in that particular hearing. I'm sure you've seen part of it. I want to follow up on a couple of lines of questions that I had with Director Cheadle that she actually answered, which was remarkable. One, she had indicated that Secret Service at the Trump rally did not have any radio recordings. Is that, in your investigation, is that accurate?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I believe there may be some recordings on the local law enforcement side. As to whether or not we have recordings on the Secret Service side, I'd have to drill back into that. And the reason you might say, well, how the heck can you not know? Well, we certainly have interviewed lots of Secret Service employees. So what we know from the interviews versus some other source, as I sit here right now, I don't know.
So on this particular case, but in your experience, and again, it's a different agency, but she had indicated, Director Cheadle had indicated that recordings sometimes are done from radio recordings, I guess, of what happens at a Trump rally or any other thing that they're engaged in. Is that your experience as well, that sometimes there are audio recordings of communications between law enforcement officials?
Just speaking very broadly, there are times when there are recordings, but it'd be hard for me to be more precise than that.
And I know that you can't answer whether they were here in this instance or not, but what would cause recordings to not exist for the Trump rally, if, as a hypothetical, what would be the reason that would happen?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if they didn't record, there may be situations where they just don't record in the first place, and why that would be, though, I'm not sure I can answer that.
Thank you. Let me ask you this, and this is another line of questioning. Director Cheadle had indicated that seconds before the would-be assassin fired the shot, roughly seconds, is when he became a person of suspicion to an actual threat. Would you agree with that assessment from Director Cheadle?
Well, let me try it this way. I think there are sort of three, in my mind, let's say three significant moments on this continuum that you're kind of getting at. There is roughly an hour before the shooting when local law enforcement observes the individual, the shooter. At that point, as somebody that was a person of concern. I forgot the exact phrasing, and that was based on seeing him with this rangefinder, no observation of a weapon, but there was something odd and off about them that caught local law enforcement's attention. So that's the first moment. Then there's a second moment, which is, I think just minutes before the shooting, where local law enforcement observed him on the roof, but didn't see a weapon, is my understanding at that point. And at that point, their level of concern obviously was even higher. And then there's the third moment, which is that moment when local law enforcement saw him, the officer who climbed up with the assistance of his colleague, and saw the shooter in the prone position with the weapon, and that's seconds before the event. And so, terminology, I'm not sure, but it seems to me there's an evolution of concern over that time period.
Correct, an escalating concern. At what point, and this again I just don't know, so I'm curious, at what point is, say, the sniper who killed Mr. Crooks, at what point is he able to fire a shot, and does he have to have authorization in which to do that?
I don't know that I know Secret Service's rules of engagement in that situation. It's possible that our interview of the counter sniper has uncovered that. Again, our focus has been, I certainly understand why you're asking the question, but our focus has been on the shooter himself and his actions and the attack. These two other reviews, the DHS Inspector General and the outside independent panel, are both looking at the performance of the Secret Service, which would, I'm confident, include the question that you're talking about.
Thank you. And I actually think, from a legislative purpose and what this body will probably ultimately do, it's of great importance that we break down barriers of communication and that we allow, officers to do their job without, so that this doesn't happen again. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Director.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Well, once again, as Congressman Fry said, we want to thank you for your time and a lot more information today than Monday. So thank you for that. I just have a handful of questions. I would love to have just a simple yes or no so we could get done with this. So on day one, President Biden issued an executive order mandating DEI programs in the executive branch. You responded by hiring FBI's first ever chief diversity officer. You're even on the Bureau's website quoting saying that diversity and inclusion of the workforce is something I care deeply about because the success of our efforts impacts our operations, our culture, and our future. End of quote. So, Director, just a simple yes or no, do you still find DEI hiring practices to be central to the FBI's operations, cultures, and future?
I believe that diversity is an important part, is a core value of a high-performing organization.
Do you have any concerns that our Homeland Security efforts will be hampered if the FBI continues to use DEI as a primary hiring measure?
I don't believe that we use DEI as a primary hiring metric. I would say that we have not lowered our standards.
Yes or no, please?
Let me, if I could finish. It's not a yes or no question. We have not lowered our standards, and the facts back that up.
Are you aware of a 112-page report compiled by senior agents and analysts which stated, quote, if the current trajectory of the FBI special agent recruitment and selection continues, using DEI as the primary and sole measure of our Homeland Security efforts will be significantly hampered. Do you know about that 112-page report?
I'm aware of a report from a number of anonymous former employees.
Thank you. Do you agree that protecting the former president falls under the umbrella of Homeland Security?
Well, protecting the former president, the physical security, the protective detail on the former president is the province of the Secret Service, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security.
It is my understanding that historically the FBI had 100,000 applications for special agents on file at any given time of the year. So talking about slipping recruitment, are you aware that on February of 2024, a letter from the FBI's Assistant Director for Training Division, which reported that FBI only received an estimated 48,000 applications over a 2-year period?
I don't know if we're comparing apple to apple. What I can tell you is that in the time that I've been FBI director, the number of Americans applying to be special agent has gone up dramatically. To the tune of, in some cases, double or triple the pace
so
it was when I. If I could
wrong?
finish, sir, if I could finish, please. To a rate that is higher, you'd have to go back about a decade or so to find the number of Americans applying to be special agents that are currently applying.
Okay, so for the record, that 48,000 is probably wrong then in your eyes?
I don't know. I don't have the letter in front of me, but what I'm not sure of is that we're comparing apple to apple in terms of time periods and everything else.
In advance of the Trump shooting, United States Secret Service Special Agent in charge Tim Burke reportedly told law enforcement partners that NATO summit in Washington, D.C. limited his resources available to the Trump rally. The service has similar DEI hiring aims and failed their zero-fail mission to protect President Trump. Director Cheadle has since stepped down. Could the hyperfixation on hitting Biden administration's imposed DEI rules by causing the FBI and the federal law enforcement agencies to not only miss their prime candidates, but also potential threats?
Well, I can't speak to Secret Service's hiring practice. What I can tell you is that, in my view, diversity, like everything else, is something that has to be done in the right way. Just like everything else, there's a right way and a wrong way to achieve it. I think we can and have achieved improvements in diversity and at the same time not lowered our standards. And I think part of the reason we've been able to do that is because of the encouraging increase in the number of Americans applying to be special agents.
The investigation into the planting of pipe bombs at the RNC and DNC headquarters has been going on for over 3.5 years and will soon have lasted longer than the Biden presidency. I look forward to you proving yourselves because we haven't received any update right now on the Trump shooting since July 15th, and the people really need that. Can the public expect a more transparent and timely investigation into the attempted assassination of former President Trump?
I've been testifying here all day about the investigation into attempted assassination of former President Trump, and we've done multiple briefings, and I've answered multiple questions.
And we appreciate that because,
Okay,
like
that's
I
what
said,
you were asking.
Well, it just seems like there hasn't been a press conference to the people to go through all the different details that were already presented today. And I'll just leave you with one final question. The government is not doing their job. Do you feel as the director that perhaps like not only the FBI but the Secret Service needs to have a complete reconstruction? Or do you think it's still put together the way that could best do its job?
The FBI that I see every single day, having visited all 56 of our field offices at least twice, many of them 3 times, the FBI that I see engaging with state and local law enforcement from all 50 states, that I hear about from prosecutors, judges, business leaders, community leaders, foreign partners, is an FBI that is respected, trusted, appreciated, and that is there for people when they need them the most. And that is the FBI that I see, and I'm very proud to be a part of them.
Any comment on the other agencies?
No, I'm not going to comment on other agencies.
Appreciate your time, sir. Yield back to the chair.
Gentleman yields back. Director, I have just a couple quick questions, but I want to give to the ranking member a chance to say some remarks or questions, and then we'll be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to say, as somebody, when I grew up, I watched The Untouchables, and I think Elliot Ness would be proud of you. I don't know about J. Edgar Hoover, but Elliot Ness for sure. Let me ask you this. In Memphis, you put Memphis and Nashville's FBI together, kind of consolidated, and in one office. And I know you've worked with our U.S. Attorney and others to work on our crime situation there, and it's gotten better. But is this change in the FBI relationship there where we're not going to have an office necessarily? Tell me how that's going to affect Memphis.
So I want to be very clear. We're not leaving Memphis. What we are doing is...
Nobody should leave Memphis. In fact, most of the songs are about people going to Memphis.
We are...
They leave Nashville. They go to Memphis.
Recognizing population growth and the threat environment, we have instead taken, if you look across the state, instead of having 2 field offices in Knoxville and Memphis, we're creating a Tennessee division headquartered in the middle in Nashville. But we are keeping the offices in Knoxville and Memphis. And in fact, when it comes to Memphis specifically, not only will it not result in any decrease in the number of agents there to work, actually, strange as it might sound, it's going to allow us to increase the number of agents who will be assigned to the Memphis office, including to tackle things like violent crime, which I know is of huge concern. And the reason for that is really the effect of this reorganization is to be able to reduce administrative roles that will be more consolidated in the middle in Nashville, but it'll allow us to increase the operational roles, the agent roles, the number of them in Memphis. So I think not only are we not leaving Memphis, we're actually increasing our investigative presence in Memphis as part of this, and we're going to be able to continue to collaborate closely with our great partners there without skipping a beat.
Thank you. That's reassuring. One of the questions was asked over here was about previous assassination attempts on presidents. And obviously, I know you're a lot younger than me, but you probably did. Did you ever watch The Untouchables?
I have watched it, yes.
They had one of the programs was on Mayor Cermak. You know Mayor Cermak?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Mayor Cermak, do you know who he was?
I do not.
He was the mayor of Chicago. And in February of 1933, there was an assassination attempt on Franklin Roosevelt in Miami, Florida. And Mayor Cermak, C-E-R-M-A-K, was killed and said, "I'm glad it was me and not you." Allegedly, he said that. But anyway, that was an attempt, and it failed, and that was Untouchables brought it into my consciousness. But thank you for your work. I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate you're not looking into changing our Democratic nominee. That's something we normally do. Thank you.
Director, I'm still not clear in my mind. When did the counter snipers, the good guys, when did they first get eyes on the bad guy, the would-be assassin, on the roof of the AGR building?
I'm not certain, but I'll take my best effort here.
I guess I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
did they have eyes on him before the local law enforcement was looking up on the roof and engaged with the bad guy shooter?
I don't know the answer to that. I will look into that and get back to you. I believe we have the answer. I just don't know that I have it. I want to make sure I answer accurately.
Because we thought from the briefings that Mr. Abbott gave us, or Bate gave us, excuse me, Abate gave us, and the briefings you gave the Congress, that they did, but it wasn't clear from your testimony. So if you can get that answer to us, that would be helpful. I want to circle back just a third time, if I could, to the Iranian threat to President Trump and some others, former members of our government. The reason I want to go back to that, because we now know that the Secret Service and Homeland Security denied resources to President Trump's detail that they had asked for. And it seems to me, if that all happened after you guys knew about the Iran threat and had briefed the Secret Service on that real threat, that's an even bigger problem. And that's why I was trying to get that timeline down, when you knew about it and when you briefed the Secret Service on the Iranians' threat to kill President Trump.
So again, I really want to be careful to both be accurate, but also not to kind of stray into any kind of classified information or confirm the existence of classified information. So let me see if there's a way for us to get back to you on that question. I understand why you're asking. It may be easier to answer than I think, but at the moment, in an open hearing, I'm not sure if I can see the right way to do that.
Fair enough. We'll expect answers to both those questions, and you can get back to this. That'd be great. Finally, anything else you want to tell us that we didn't ask? I mean, you came today and you told us some things that weren't even prompted by questions, and I just want to make sure if there's anything else you want to tell us regarding July 13th and what you've discovered. Now's the time.
Well, again, we're going to continue to engage with the Congress. I think we've covered a lot of the points that I really wanted to make sure that I got across, and just as I'm looking at my list, in one way or another through the course of today's questioning, I think we've gotten through most of it.
That concludes today's hearing. We thank our witness for appearing before the committee today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Wow, ये लैम्प कहाँ से लिया? From the Andamans. Private jet से cargo करवाया. Really? Beautiful. Heritage piece from Jodhpur. There are only 5 in the world. Custom बनवाया है. Cool से.
और ये कहाँ से?
Mintra Home से. Just like everything else, handpicked by Masaba. I think someone.
Election, quote, it's going to take a civil war to save the country, and it will be saved. The president of the Heritage Foundation, taxpayer dollars, addressing even one aspect of the political violence that now threatens our country. Perhaps, had this Republican majority lifted a finger to help a nation that is awash in guns, the assassin in Butler would not have had such easy access to the weapon he used to fire on that crowd. Director Wray, your agency is responsible for addressing some of the most serious issues of our time. The Bureau Fights Gun Violence, which claims the lives of 40,000 Americans every year. It protects election security from growing threats from malign foreign actors who are working tirelessly to influence our elections. It protects against domestic terrorists and violent extremists who have been a growing threat in recent years and have carried out horrific mass shootings and deadly events around the country. And so much more. I apologize to you, Director, that instead of supporting you in these missions in the 118th Congress, some of my colleagues have instead hindered your work, maligned your agents, and called to abolish and defund your agency, all for political gain. It is despicable, especially from the party that claims to, quote, back the blue. And I know that you and your many agents and employees have paid the price for these baseless attacks. I know you have faced a barrage of threats, distrust, and vitriol from the public as a result of these wild, politically driven conspiracies. I know it has become even more dangerous and difficult for you to come to work each day. I may not agree with you on everything, but I sincerely thank you and every employee in your agency who continues to protect our country. The FBI is vital to keeping America safe, and I pray that today we can focus on the real, substantive work of the agency. It is the least we owe our country in these times. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness. The Honorable Christopher Wray has been the director of the FBI since 2017. He previously served as the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, and Associate Deputy Attorney General, and as Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Again, Director Wray, you've been here many times. We appreciate you being here today, and look forward to your testimony and answering our questions. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. We have votes coming in about 10 minutes, but we definitely want to get through your opening statement as far as we can, and this is going to be an interesting day on Capitol Hill with the Prime Minister of Israel here as well. So, Director Wray, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, members of the committee. I want to begin by offering my condolences on the passing of Representative Jackson Lee, who served the people of Texas in this body and on this committee for so long. Thank you all for your support of our efforts to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. I am proud to be here today representing the 38,000 special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff who make up the FBI, men and women who every day work relentlessly to counter the most complex threat environment I've seen in my tenure as FBI director, maybe in my entire career in law enforcement. Before I go any further, I also want to acknowledge and offer my deepest condolences to the victims of the horrific assassination attempt in Butler County, to the friends and family of Corey Comparator, who by all accounts lost his life protecting others from danger, to the other victims, two of whom were critically wounded, and of course, to President Trump, former President Trump and his family. As I've said from the beginning, the attempted assassination of the former president was an attack on our democracy and our democratic process, and we will not and do not tolerate political violence of any kind, especially a despicable account of this magnitude. And I want to assure you and the American people that the men and women of the FBI will continue to work tirelessly to get to the bottom of what happened. We are bringing all the resources of the FBI to bear, both criminal and national security. Now, there's a whole lot of work underway and still a lot of work to do, and our understanding of what happened and why will continue to evolve, but we're going to leave no stone unturned. The shooter may be deceased, but the FBI's investigation is very much ongoing. To that point, I also want to acknowledge that I recognize both the congressional and the public interest in this case and the importance of this investigation to the American people. And I understand there are a lot of open questions. So while the investigation is very much ongoing and our assessments of the shooter and his actions continue to evolve, my hope here today is to do my best to provide you with all the information I can, given where we are at this point. I have been saying for some time now that we are living in an elevated threat environment. And tragically, the Butler County assassination attempt is another example, a particularly heinous and very public one, of what I've been talking about. But it also reinforces our need at the FBI and our ongoing commitment to stay focused on the threats, on the mission, and on the people we do the work with and the people we do the work for. Every day, all across this country and indeed around the world, the men and women of the FBI are doing just that, working around the clock to counter the threats we face. Just in the last year, for example, in California, the FBI and our partners targeted an organized crime syndicate responsible for trafficking fentanyl, meth, and cocaine all across North America. We charged the Mexican-based suppliers who brought the drugs into the United States, a network of Canada-based truck drivers who delivered the drugs, and the distributors in the United States who spread the poison into our communities. Staying on threats emanating from the border, I have warned for some time now about the threat that foreign terrorists may seek to exploit our southwest border or some other port of entry to advance a plot against Americans. Just last month, for instance, the Bureau and our Joint Terrorism Task Forces worked with ICE in multiple cities across the country as several individuals with suspected international terrorist ties were arrested using ICE's immigration authorities. Leading up to those arrests, hundreds of FBI employees dedicated countless hours to understand the threat and identify additional individuals of concern. Now, the physical security of the border is, of course, not in the FBI's lane, but as the threat has escalated, we're working with our partners in law enforcement and the intelligence community to find and stop foreign terrorists who would harm Americans and our interests. As concerning as the known or suspected terrorists encountered at the border are, perhaps even more concerning are those we do not yet know about because they provided fake documents or because we didn't have information connecting them to terrorism at the time they arrived in the United States. Staying ahead of today's threats demands that we work together. And for the FBI, that means doubling down on our partnerships, especially with state and local law enforcement. Whether it's working through our hundreds of joint terrorism task forces, to build out source networks, to identify those who slip through the cracks, or targeting the worst of the worst responsible for the violence that still plagues far too many communities through our Safe Streets task forces, or taking the fight to the cartels responsible for trafficking the dangerous drugs like fentanyl, pouring into our country and claiming countless American lives. Staying ahead of the threat also means continuing to disrupt the cyber criminals ravaging businesses, large and small, and confronting nation states like China, targeting our innovation and our critical infrastructure. At the Bureau, we're proud to work side by side with our brothers and sisters in federal, state, and local law enforcement, our partners in the intelligence community, and others around the world to fulfill our commitment to keep Americans safe. Now, on Friday, the FBI will celebrate its 116th anniversary. 116 years of protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution. 116 years of working with our partners to safeguard the communities we serve. 116 years of innovating to stay ahead of the complex, evolving, and very real threats out there. I am proud of the legacy the men and women of the FBI have built and all they have accomplished for the American people. So, if I may, as we approach this week's anniversary, I would just like to say to all those who are part of the FBI family, from our current employees to our formers and to our partners across law enforcement and the intelligence community, thank you. Thank you for dedicating your lives to this country and to its people. It is both humbling and an honor to serve alongside you, and I look forward to the work we're going to continue to do together. And with that, thank you again for having me, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Director Wray. Excuse me. We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, I'm way down here, and I appreciate the chairman giving me this because I've got to leave. But Let me ask this question. Why doesn't the FBI disclose to the American people all of the investigative detail and evidence that you are gathering as it is gathered?
Well, we have tried to be transparent with both Congress and the American people as we're going along in the investigation, frankly, unusually so for an ongoing investigation, given the sheer nature of it. We have provided a lot of information. I expect to continue to provide information. I expect to be able to provide some additional information here today in response to your questions and your colleagues. But part of the issue is that, as like in any investigation, as we proceed, facts evolve. Our understanding of what somebody said turns out to have more context that we didn't have before. We have additional leads out there. So part of our goal is not just to respect the ongoing investigation process, but also to make sure that we don't prematurely provide information that then 2 days later turns out to be different than what we told people, because that's very much, kind of a natural part of any investigation.
So, did Crooks fire 8 shots?
We have recovered 8 cartridges on the roof.
Why was Crooks allowed to get off 8 shots?
Well, that, I think, is something we're still digging into. Again, maybe this is a good place for me to make clear the different investigations that are going on. So, because certainly I understand
and given that I've only got 3 minutes left, okay, and I know other members, I'm really interested because I appreciate your invitation. You said you're prepared to disclose things as questions are asked. So I don't want to waste time. I just want to get to the questions that might, and as many members as can, ask questions that you'll answer. I actually think I'd be glad for you to go on soliloquy, frankly, and tell us what you know. I think the American people want to know. Why was President Trump not kept off the stage?
We don't know the answer to that, but I want to be clear, and this is important because I think it goes to questions that I can and cannot answer. Our investigation, the FBI's mandate, is focused on the shooter and all things related to his attack. Now, obviously, I understand very much the intense interest and focus on the Secret Service's performance, actions, decision-making, et cetera. There are 2 separate after-action reviews, the DHS Inspector General and the outside independent panel that's been convened that are focused on that. Now, our investigation will obviously overlap with that.
Here's the problem. We're out 13 days, and you say we've been disclosing. We had the the colonel from the Pennsylvania State Police in front of Homeland yesterday. He was quite candid. He disclosed to us that Butler Emergency Services Unit personnel were posted into the windows on the 2nd floor of the AGR building, that they left there to go pursue the person that they spotted, Crooks, that they texted a photo of Crooks to the PSP representative in the command center. That information was relayed to the United States Secret Service. They asked that it be texted to someone else. That was many minutes before President Trump took the stand. What we don't know is why were they not keeping him off the stand? And to the extent, I know we always hear when there's a criminal investigation, you got to wait for that to develop. But do you have any reason do you have any other target of your criminal investigation other than Crooks, who's dead?
We are investigating the shooter both to determine his motive and his preparations and activities before the shooting, but also to make sure whether or not there are any co-conspirators, accomplices.
At this point, have you developed any evidence to so suggest that there are any accomplices or cooperators or assisters?
Not at this time, but again, the investigation's ongoing.
So here's the thing. While we wait, maybe for months, and I hate to say this, I'm not trying to take a pot shot, but the country went for years with the understanding that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation as offered by respected former intel officials, and the whole time the FBI had the laptop and then let that happen in public until finally offering testimony in a case. To the degree we wait to hear as a country and as a Congress what has happened in this event, because the FBI is conducting an investigation, it provides quarter for the U.S. Secret Service not perhaps to reckon with the problems that are obvious to everyone. So let's get a couple in while I've got 13 more seconds. One more question, perhaps. Senator Grassley says that the records of the day show that there was a counter unmanned aerial surveillance operator on site. Was there? And why did that person not prevent Crooks from being able to use a drone?
So again, questions about the Secret Service's performance are better directed to those other reviews. What I can tell you when it comes to drones is that Crooks himself had a drone, and I'm prepared to answer questions here today about the shooter and his use of the drone, for example.
My time's expired.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in my opening statement, political violence is a scourge and entirely unacceptable, no matter the source or the target. Last October, a far-right conspiracy theorist broke into Nancy Pelosi's home and bludgeoned her husband. Prominent Republicans mocked the attack and promoted conspiracy theories about it. Last August, an armed Utah man who threatened to kill President Biden was killed as FBI agents attempted to serve a warrant on him hours before President Biden landed in his state. Some on the right claimed that the man was simply a, quote, Second Amendment enthusiast. In recent weeks and months, those on the right have repeatedly called for, quote, civil war, with an Ohio state senator saying that if Republicans lose the election, quote, it's going to take a civil war to save the country, and it will be saved. The president of the Heritage Foundation likewise said that, quote, we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be, close quote. Director Wray, it's obviously important that we respect First Amendment protections, but there is clearly a point at which some violent rhetoric crosses over into threats of violence or leads to actual violence. Could you describe how the FBI looks at this relationship between rhetoric and action and what you are seeing around the country?
So I appreciate the question, and this is an issue that I've been talking about for some time. In our view, there is a right way and a wrong way under the First Amendment to express your views, no matter how passionate or even angry you are. And violence and threats of violence is not the right way. And we don't care what you're upset about or who you're upset with. When, from the FBI's perspective, when it turns to violence and threats of violence, that's when we have to draw the line. That's when we get engaged. And there is an alarming phenomenon that we've seen over the last several years of that kind of passion and heated rhetoric turning into actual violence and threats of violence. We've seen it against public officials of all sorts. We've seen it against law enforcement. The number of officers shot and killed in the line of duty in this country is, frankly, outrageous and alarming. And I know that because every time an officer is shot and killed anywhere in this country, since the day I started as FBI director, I personally call the chief or the sheriff to express my condolences and to talk to them about the victim's family. And the number of those shootings that are ambush-related, meaning somebody is targeting law enforcement because they're law enforcement, is particularly alarming. I have made around 400 of those phone calls. It's almost every 5 days that a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty. And that is an example of the kind of ways in which passions and heated rhetoric can bubble over into violence.
Thank you. Members of Congress, their families, and their staffs have witnessed an alarming rise in threats against them. I appreciate the work your agency has done to investigate and address these threats, but I'm concerned that we do not seem to be stemming the tide. What is the FBI doing to ensure that members of Congress, their families, and their staffs are safe?
So we have a very close relationship with the Capitol Police, and we have members of the Capitol Police, for example, who are on some of our task forces. We share intelligence information about things that we're seeing, trends that we're seeing with Capitol Police and others in law enforcement. Obviously, if we have specific information about an effort to target a member of Congress, then we're getting with Capitol Police in a much more specific way. But those are some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. Now, Director, your office is leading the investigation into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Republicans in Congress, including members of this committee, have repeatedly called for defunding the FBI. What impact would defunding or even just limiting your funding have on the FBI's ability to conduct this and other investigations?
So I understand that there are heated views, opinions about us, just like there are about every institution in today's America. But cutting our funding is incredibly short-sighted, and the people it really hurts are state and local law enforcement and the American people we're all sworn to protect.
Thank you. During my remaining time, I want to turn to a different matter. In recent days, Republican members of Congress have attacked presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris as a, quote, DEI candidate, which presumably is code for women and person of color. It's not a new theme for them. In May, Chairman Jordan wrote to you claiming that because of DEI initiatives, the FBI is no longer hiring, quote, the best and brightest candidates to fill the position of special agent. With my remaining time, Director Wray, can you please answer the following questions? Is it true that hiring women and people of color means that FBI is no longer hiring the best and the brightest to serve as law enforcement officers? Is there any evidence that women and people of color are less effective in law enforcement roles? And what message does it send to prospective applicants when the leaders demean them and make judgments about them based solely on their race or gender?
Witness may respond.
So any notion that we have lowered our standards, our hiring standards, is just not accurate. In fact, our standards are as competitive and selective as ever. We have tens of thousands of people applying, and our selection rate is about 3.1%, which is more selective than just about any university in the country. And most of our applicants, I think something like 50% of them are coming from military or law enforcement backgrounds. About 50% of them also have advanced degrees. The average age is around 31, which means they're bringing a wealth of personal and professional experience when they arrive. And to suggest that those people, because of efforts related to diversity or anything like that, are less qualified, frankly, is not at all consistent with what I see. Having visited all of our field offices and seen these young people in action, I think is an insult to those hardworking men and women who've signed up to dedicate their lives for this country.
Thank you, Director. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Director, let me go back to where Mr. Bishop was. Tell me about the drone. You act like you wanted to fill us in on that. Fill us in.
So we have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab. The drone was recovered in his vehicle. So at the time of the shooting, the drone was in his vehicle with the controller. In addition, our investigation has uncovered.
Do you know what time of day he flew it, and if he flew it on the day of the shot?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So in addition, it appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area
2
for
hours
about 11 minutes. I want to be clear, but when I say the area, not over the stage and that part of the area itself, but I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away from that. We think, but we do not know. So again, this is one of these things that's qualified because of our ongoing review, that he was live streaming, viewing the footage from that, again, about 11 minutes in around the 3:50, 4 o'clock p.m. range.
2 hours before, he's flying a drone in the vicinity of the route.
About 200 yards away, yes.
200 yards. Okay, that's important information. What about the bombs that we heard about in the shooter's car?
So again, the FBI lab is exploiting those explosive devices. Yep. We've recovered 3 devices, 2 in his vehicle and 1 back in his residence.
Are these what you would call, your experts would call sophisticated operations, or this? I don't know. That's what I've been told by people who have some understanding of this area.
Yeah, I think it's. We've seen more sophisticated and less. I would say these are relatively, again, keyword relatively crude devices themselves, but they did have the ability to be detonated remotely. And so to that point, in addition to the 2 devices that we recovered out of his vehicle, there were receivers for those 2 explosive devices with the devices. And then on the shooter himself, when he was killed by law enforcement, he had a transmitter with him. Now, I do want to add one important point here, is at the moment, it looks to us, again, ongoing review, and I can't say that too many times. At a moment, it looks like because of the on-off position on the receivers, that if he had tried to detonate those devices from the roof, it would not have worked. Okay. But that doesn't mean the explosives weren't dangerous.
And I'm sure we're going to get into all these subjects a little bit later as well. Tell us what you can about the encrypted platforms we've heard about.
So one of the things that we're drilling into hard with the shooter in an effort to try to learn more about his state of mind, his motive, his ideology, his context, everything else, is to look at all of his devices any social media accounts he had, et
right.
cetera. And one of the things we've learned in finally getting into his phone, which was also a significant technical challenge from an encryption perspective, but in addition, once we got on the phone, it turned out he was using some encrypted messaging applications.
And again, the same question relative to the bombs: was this pretty sophisticated, or is this is the kind of the norm you see with folks like similar situation? How would you describe
on this subject? I would say this has unfortunately now become very commonplace, and it's a real challenge for not just the FBI but state and local law enforcement all over the state.
Tell me exactly the scope of does the scope of your investigation include what I call that critical 5 minutes from when the 6:09, when this is based, I think, on information you've given to Congress, 6:09 when the shooter's identified on the roof, and 6:14 when President Trump is ultimately escorted off, and all that happens, the shots that take place in between there. Do you have access to the communications that were going on at the time in that critical 5 minutes?
So our investigation, when you say scope, our investigation includes that time frame, although focused again on the shooter himself.
I understand.
And his
The shooter's involved in that. He's obviously involved in that time frame.
Correct. And as part of that, as part of our focus, our investigation of the shooter and the attack, of course, we are interviewing law enforcement from the scene because those are some of the most significant witnesses, and we're obviously getting access to their materials and that kind of thing. And the Secret Service has been fully cooperative.
You have access to the communications that exist there.
That exact question, I don't, as I sit here at the moment, I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I know that Secret Service has been cooperative with us.
The Congress would like access to those communications as well. I mean, not just that 5 minutes, although I think that's the critical time frame. There's lots of communications we'd love to have access as well. I see my time is up, and they have called votes on the floor. I think there are about 6 minutes left in votes, so the committee will stand in recess until approximately 10 minutes after votes conclude on the House floor.